You start. Okay, so hello. Hi. Politics. Okay. Well, I mean, it's a complex topic, but an inevitable one. At least from my perspective, being a dancer, performer, dance maker, blah blah blah, in a context like Egypt, where the decision to make art or be involved in art is in and of itself a political act, even if you do not in any way wish to be involved in the politics. So I think it's a question of being aware of the repercussions, being aware of the circumstances, being aware of the possibilities, and also trying to have control over the decision of how much you want to be involved in. Sometimes you have that choice, and sometimes you don't have that choice. You are implicated for sure. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but in a place like the Cairo Contemporary Dance Center, which is the place that I run, we try to, as much as possible, without politicizing everything, but I think it's very important for people who are studying or involved in dance and the arts in general in a place like Egypt. They need to have that awareness. The decision afterwards, whether they want to be involved or not, is theirs, but they need to develop that sensibility and awareness to it. Because there's also politics outside of that context, for sure, in the dance world, and that's yet another level to it. So, I mean, in a few words.
Wow. I kept hearing you say, be aware, be aware, be aware. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to think about how, from the perspective of where our school is in the US, and as I look across, to Cairo, or as I extend my thinking and my imagining to the context in which you are placed with your students, there's this enormous impossibility that I have to acknowledge. So, what that impossibility does is it kind of charges a space where I realize about awareness. It becomes heightened, where I hope that in our school that there's a kind of, that we can consider awareness through ideas of the ethics of care, maybe. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's this responsibility around, that we are in the world, that dance is in the world. We are not outside the world. Mm-hmm. So even though I'm in the US, and even though there's the impossibility of knowing, there's still a responsibility of awareness, that how dances get made and why, and what, and even I was reading about, as it relates to maybe politics, that these social cartographies, or these mappings of our interactions as dancers, they are also reinforcing or maybe reimagining how we can be aware. So I would say, I try to think about how through practice our students, our faculty can maybe extend their reach, like how far can they imagine, how far can they their reach be to place themselves in outside of this maybe the walls of an institution that maybe oftentimes like a school, like how can we situate our practice always in the world, that even when we're in the studio, we are in the world.
Yeah.
So and how is language connected to all of that and to the body and touch? I don't know if that answers, but I'm trying to respond.
Yeah, and awareness is key in all of that, and it comes in different shapes and forms. I think it's the assumptions and presumptions that stop us from becoming aware and stop us from questioning, and because sometimes we take a stance and we think that this is the ultimate truth, whereas there's a completely different reality somewhere else that completely changes things. And in regards to language, of course there is that, but then in a very romantic sense, the language of dance and the universality of that, but then also there is the politics of the body, and the innate politics that already exist in the body, from experiences, from history that is already there, but also again awareness pops up, and becoming aware of that, and deciding to use it or not, why use it and why not use it, how is it being used, and this in the artistic process then for artists, the question of why do I do what I do and how do I do it, and while creating, again being aware of how some of the work that is being created can be read, interpreted, misread, but then making the choice an artistic one, and not all the time thinking of how is this going to be perceived or how is this going to be used. And so because when I think about how it's going to be perceived, then I'm back in the political. Exactly. Yes.
Because then there's this sort of relationality. There's suddenly an audience, or there's a public and a private. So I think I'm constantly in this position of trying to think about how to create an environment in a school where where the students can ask each other these questions that you're saying, or that you're bringing to my mind about how do we think and make and think and do. So it's like inside that looping of thinking, making, that keeps me curious, but also hard at work, right?
Yeah, I think it's sometimes very. I mean, I feel that it's a bit sometimes unfair or hard to burden artists or in terms of dance or dance students with politics, because it really weighs the work down, and it can sometimes steer the direction a little bit. However, I do think that awareness is very important, but then it's about the dosing. How far do I want to go, and how far do I want to be implicated, and know when to step back so that it doesn't alter my direction or my decisions in terms of the artistic. So yeah, it's like a trapeze or tightrope act, balancing act.
Yeah, but I like the idea of balance. Like you have to find your way.
Yeah.